Hello, my name is Marissa, and for years, I believed my family had my back. But on Thanksgiving, they made up a lie to keep me from attending. Leaving me alone. That was just the beginning. The truth was far darker. They didn't just exclude me, they planned to trap me in the wilderness, abandoning me and my daughter in the freezing snow. I was forced to survive without help, betrayed by the very people who should have protected us. And now, I'm about to expose everything. But what will happen when I finally confront the family that left me for dead? The cold air hit my face like a slap as I stepped out of bed, my breath visible in the morning chill. The cabin was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the faint hiss of the coffee maker in the corner. Snow was falling outside, the world beyond the window a blanket of white, eerily still, almost as if it was holding its breath. This place, this remote cabin in the Pacific Northwest, was supposed to be our escape. But now, it felt like a prison. I moved slowly, stretching, the exhaustion from the previous day still clinging to me. My muscles ached, but it wasn't just physical pain I was dealing with, it was something deeper. The ache of years of disappointment, betrayal, and grief. I glanced over at the empty side of the bed where my daughter, Violet, had slept. She was already awake, I could tell by the absence of the soft snoring she usually did. I walked over to the window, watching the snowflakes swirl outside, each one unique but falling together as one. My thoughts wandered to the past, to the days when life felt different, when the world hadn't turned on me. When my family hadn't torn itself apart. I had tried to hold things together, for Violet, for myself. But the truth was, I was always fighting something bigger than me. I sighed and turned toward the kitchen. The coffee smelled strong, bitter. It reminded me of the way life had tasted recently. I poured myself a cup, the hot liquid steaming as it hit the cold air. I stared into it, willing it to answer the questions swirling in my mind. What had gone wrong? When had I become the one left behind? Was this really the life I was meant to live, isolated in a cabin with a daughter who barely knew what was happening to us? A knock at the door broke my thoughts, and I jumped, the cup slipping from my hands and crashing to the floor. My heart raced, adrenaline pumping through me as I scrambled to clean up the mess. I glanced at Violet, who stood in the doorway, her face a mask of confusion and worry. "Mom, who was that?" she asked, her voice trembling. I didn't have an answer for her. I moved to the door and opened it, expecting to see one of the few people who could find us here, either Tristan, my brother, or one of my parents. But there was nothing, just the biting cold of the outside world. The snow had picked up, thickening the air. Confused, I stepped back into the house and locked the door again, my mind racing. I didn't understand. The calm I had felt only moments before was gone, replaced by a growing sense of unease. Something was wrong. I turned to Violet, forcing a smile, though it felt strained. "Don't worry, honey. It's just the wind," I lied. But even as I said it, my gut twisted. I felt the weight of something more pressing bearing down on me. Why had they left? Why hadn't anyone come to check on us? They were supposed to be here. Family, after all, was supposed to be a safety net. Instead, it felt like a trap. I was halfway through making breakfast when I realized something else was missing. My parents' cars were gone. So were Tristan's. I could feel the panic bubbling up, a wave of dread washing over me. They had all disappeared, leaving me and Violet alone in this cold wilderness. No goodbye, no warning, just an empty cabin. "Mom, where did they go?" Violet asked, her voice laced with confusion and a hint of fear. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know, sweetie. But we're going to figure this out." My hands were shaking as I reached for the note left on the kitchen table. It was hastily written, the ink smudged slightly as if the writer had been in a rush. I read the words, my heart sinking further with every line. "This is for the best. Trust me." I read it again, trying to make sense of it. Trust me? Who? What the hell was going on? Violet stared at the note, then up at me. "Why did they leave us here, Mom?" I didn't have an answer. The betrayal in her eyes cut deeper than any words I could say. How was I supposed to explain this to her? How could I explain something I didn't even understand myself? I wanted to scream, to rage at the unfairness of it all, but instead, I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I don't know, sweetie," I said softly. "But I'm here. And I'll make sure we get through this. We always do. But inside, I was shaking. They hadn't just left. They had abandoned us. And I knew deep down that this wasn't just some misunderstanding. No, this was something more, something far worse. The thought settled over me like a heavy fog. My family had planned this. They had gone so far as to leave me and Violet behind, to leave us stranded, without a second thought. I stepped back and looked around the cabin, suddenly aware of how small it felt. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. My whole life had been reduced to this. A lonely cabin in the middle of nowhere, with no one to turn to but my daughter. I didn't know how I was going to fix this. I didn't know how we were going to survive out here. But I knew one thing. I was going to make sure they paid for this. I was done being a victim. I turned to Violet, trying to keep my voice calm, though it trembled slightly. "Pack your things, sweetheart. We're leaving." She nodded, though I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. We didn't have much, just what we could carry. Some canned food, a couple of water bottles, and warm clothing. The rest was useless in the dead of winter. I could feel the weight of our situation bearing down on me. I had no choice but to fight. I knew the forest would be our only ally or our grave. We headed out the door, the snow crunching beneath our feet. Violet's small hand slipped into mine, and I squeezed it tightly, trying to comfort her, even though I wasn't sure how to comfort myself. I heard a noise in the distance, a crackling sound, like something breaking under the weight of the snow. My heart raced. Was it Tristan? Or someone else? I turned to Violet, my grip tightening. "Stay close. I don't know who's out there, but I won't let anything happen to you." We kept moving, the snow thickening around us. The trees loomed, their shadows stretching long across the ground. Something didn't feel right. We were being watched. And then, in the distance, I saw it. A shadow. Moving too fast, too deliberately through the snow. It was a figure, someone, or something, coming for us. The sun had started to set, casting long shadows across the snow-covered forest floor. The world was quiet except for the soft crunch of snow beneath our feet. I tried to keep my breathing steady, the cold biting through my jacket, but the chill I felt inside was harder to shake off. I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all, the betrayal, the isolation, the utter uncertainty of our situation. My family had left us here, without a second thought. The silence between me and Violet was heavy, but I knew we had to keep moving. There was no other choice. Violet had been silent for most of the day. I kept glancing at her, seeing the worry in her eyes. She was stronger than most girls her age, but I could tell this was hitting her harder than she let on. I had to be strong for her, but with every step, I felt the weight of it all pulling me down. We'd walked for hours, trying to get as far from the cabin as possible. But the further we went, the more the wilderness closed in on us. There was no path, no sign of any other human being. Only trees and snow, stretching on forever. "Mom," Violet's voice broke the silence, her voice small, almost lost in the vastness of the forest. "Where are we going?" I didn't have a good answer for her. "We're finding shelter," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Just a little further." But my body was growing weary, and every step seemed to take more effort than the last. My legs burned, my chest ached with each breath, and my mind kept circling back to the reality of what had happened. My family had abandoned us. They had left us here, in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but the cold and each other. And it wasn't just the physical exhaustion. It was the emotional toll, too, the betrayal, the gut-wrenching realization that they hadn't even thought twice. We were nothing to them. As the afternoon wore on, the temperature dropped. Violet's shivering grew more pronounced, and I could feel the desperation creeping in. I knew we couldn't stay out here much longer. We needed to find shelter, warmth, food, anything. And then, we saw it. A small makeshift shelter, a lean-to, tucked between a few large trees. It was the kind of place we had hoped to find, a temporary refuge from the cold. I felt a flicker of relief in my chest. But as we approached, I saw something that crushed the small hope that had sparked inside me. Someone was already there. A group, from the looks of it, 3 or 4 people, huddled together for warmth. Their laughter echoed in the crisp air, jarring against the silence of the forest. I froze, my mind racing. We couldn't just stand here. Violet noticed the change in my expression and tugged at my sleeve. "Mom?" she whispered. I didn't respond at first, but I could see the panic in her eyes. Let's keep moving, I said, trying to sound calm, even though my mind was in chaos. We couldn't stay here. They might have supplies. They might even be willing to help us, but I didn't trust anyone anymore. Not after what my family had done. We turned and walked back into the woods, the heavy weight of our reality settling in. Every step felt like we were sinking deeper, farther away from safety. There was no turning back now. We were alone. The cold was beginning to feel unbearable. My fingers were numb, my breath coming out in white clouds that vanished as quickly as they appeared. I glanced at Violet. She was walking beside me, her small figure hunched against the wind, her breath coming in ragged gasps. We'll find a place, Violet, I said, more to reassure myself than her. We'll keep moving, and we'll find somewhere safe. I promise. Her eyes were wide, but she didn't say anything. I could see the fear in her, but there was something else there too, a strength that I hadn't seen before. She was still just a child, but I could see her growing up in front of me, her resilience pulling her forward even when everything around her seemed hopeless. The thought of Violet made me push forward, but as the hours passed, the landscape began to blur. The cold gnawed at my bones, the hunger gnawed at my stomach, and my mind began to wander. My thoughts spun, a constant reel of everything that had gone wrong. The pain, the betrayal, the crushing weight of it all. How had it come to this? How had I let it happen? I had to keep going, though. For Violet. We came across a creek, frozen in some places, flowing in others. I knelt beside it, the cold seeping into my knees as I tried to scoop some water. My hands shook from the cold, my fingers stiff, and the water was barely more than ice now. It wasn't enough to sustain us, but it was all we had. I tried to ignore the exhaustion creeping into my body, the fear building in my chest. There was no way to know how long we'd been walking, but I knew we couldn't stop. We needed to move. We needed to find shelter before nightfall. As we trudged onward, I could feel the weight of the day settling in, the harsh reality of survival setting in. It wasn't just the cold. It was everything. The fear, the anger, the disbelief. And then, in the distance, I heard something. A rustling in the trees. A snap of a branch. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked around, scanning the darkening forest, but I couldn't see anything. "Mom?" Violet whispered, her voice barely audible. I held up my hand, motioning for her to stay quiet. The sound came again, closer this time. My pulse quickened, the fear tightening in my throat. "Stay close," I said, my voice low and steady, though every instinct in me was screaming to run. We started moving again, faster now, the shadows growing longer as the sun dipped below the horizon. I held Violet's hand tightly, trying to ignore the rising panic. Someone, or something, was out there. I didn't know who or what, but the feeling of being watched was undeniable. "I won't let anything happen to you," I whispered, trying to convince myself as much as I was trying to comfort her. The forest was silent again, but I could still feel the presence, like a shadow lingering just beyond our reach. Something was out there, and I wasn't sure if it was friend or foe. All I knew was that we had to keep moving. We had to survive. The cold was biting, gnawing at us like a constant reminder that we were running out of time. We had been walking for hours now, through the relentless snow, the weight of our situation pressing down on me with every step. I looked down at Violet, her face pale, her lips cracked and dry. She had barely spoken in the last hour, her small frame hunched against the freezing wind. "Mom, how much further?" Violet's voice was barely a whisper, the sound almost lost to the wind. I took a deep breath, trying to push the fear down. We'd reached an old cabin, tucked away in the woods, its weathered wood standing defiantly against the elements. My heart had leapt when I saw it, a beacon of hope amidst the snow-covered wilderness. I hoped it would be a place to rest, to warm up, maybe even find something to eat. But as soon as we stepped inside, my heart sank. It was empty. There were signs of past habitation, a faded rug on the floor, a rusted stove in the corner, but there was nothing else. No firewood, no supplies, no food. Violet collapsed in the corner, exhausted, her eyes closed tightly. I could hear her shivering, but she said nothing. I had to focus, I told myself. I had to be strong. I made my way over to the small pile of wood near the door, but my hands were too numb to hold onto the pieces. The fire pit in the center of the cabin seemed like a cruel reminder that we couldn't even light a fire to warm us. "Mom," Violet's voice trembled as she called my name. I looked over at her, heart aching as I watched her struggle to keep her eyes open. "We'll figure it out, Violet," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I kept my voice steady, but inside, I was spiraling. I'd gotten us this far, but now? Now, I wasn't sure if I could keep going. The weight of the snowstorm outside, the vast wilderness around us, the emptiness inside this cabin, it was too much. I sat down next to Violet, rubbing her hands to warm them. The cold seemed to creep inside my bones, making everything feel heavy. But I couldn't stop now. We had to keep moving. "Just a little longer," I whispered to her, more to myself than to her. But as the night fell, I knew we couldn't stay here forever. Our supplies were running out, and the cold was getting worse. The idea of trying to make it through the night here, alone, cold, with nothing to protect us, felt impossible. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to tell Violet that. She was looking to me for answers, for strength. And I couldn't let her down. I stared out the broken window into the growing darkness, the sound of the wind howling through the trees. The isolation was deafening. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. I realized then how much I had underestimated the wilderness, how ill-prepared we were for this journey. My heart ached for Violet. She deserved better than this. She deserved safety, warmth, comfort. But instead, I had brought her here, into the cold, into the unknown. The silence between us stretched on, and I couldn't help but think back to when things were different. Before all this, when I still had a family. A family I thought I could trust. But now? Now, it was just the two of us, and every step forward felt heavier than the last. Suddenly, Violet shifted beside me, her small hand reaching up to tug at my sleeve. "Mom," she said again, her voice weak. "Do you think we're going to be okay?" I swallowed hard. I wanted to tell her yes. I wanted to promise her that everything would be fine. But I couldn't lie to her. The truth was, I didn't know. "I don't know, sweetie," I finally said, my voice breaking. "But we're going to try. We're going to do everything we can." Violet looked up at me, her wide eyes filled with fear, but there was something else there too, something that reminded me of myself. A spark of determination. She was strong, even if I wasn't sure how much more we could both take. The night wore on, the cold creeping deeper into my bones. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in on me. I kept thinking about the things we had left behind, the things I couldn't change. The life we had before, and how far we had fallen from it. As the night passed and the hours seemed to stretch on endlessly, my mind began to race. What were we going to do? What could we do? My thoughts spun in circles, but no answers came. We had no food, no warmth, and no real plan. By morning, I knew we couldn't stay here any longer. The cold had taken its toll, and the despair that had settled in my chest was slowly being replaced with something else, something sharper. I had to get us out of here. We had to move, even if it meant walking farther into the unknown. Violet had barely slept, but when I shook her awake, she didn't complain. She just followed me, her hand still clutching mine. We didn't speak much as we packed up the little we had. But the air felt different now, thick with urgency. Every step was a reminder of how far we still had to go, how much we had to endure. I wasn't sure what awaited us out there in the cold, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't give up. Not now. Not when there was still a chance, no matter how small, to get out of this alive. As we walked through the snow, the sun still low in the sky, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The sound of crunching snow echoed in the distance, and I turned to Violet. She looked up at me with wide, fearful eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, do you think someone is following us?" I stopped walking, scanning the trees. The silence seemed unnaturally thick. "I don't know, Violet," I said, my heart racing. "But we're going to keep moving. We can't stop." I had no idea if anyone, or anything, was behind us. But the feeling that we weren't alone was undeniable. Something was out there, and I didn't know if it was our salvation, or our doom. The snow continued to fall, heavier now, a blanket of white stretching endlessly before us. Each step I took felt like an eternity, as if the cold was conspiring to drag me down with every movement. My body ached, my hands frozen stiff, but I kept walking. Violet stumbled beside me, her small figure barely visible through the snow. I could hear her faint breathing, ragged and shallow. She hadn't spoken in what felt like hours. I wanted to say something, anything to comfort her, but the words didn't come. What could I say? How could I explain the situation we were in? The wilderness seemed endless, the trees around us standing like silent sentinels, watching us as we trudged forward. It was late afternoon now, the light beginning to fade as dusk settled in. We had no idea where we were going or how much further we could go. The only thing I knew was that we couldn't stay in the wilderness forever. Every instinct in my body screamed that we needed to keep moving to survive. Then, just as I thought we couldn't go any further, a figure appeared ahead of us. I froze, heart racing, eyes narrowing against the wind. The man didn't look much different from us, his clothes worn and stained by the elements. But there was something about him that set me on edge. He didn't move like someone who was lost, someone who was struggling to survive. He moved with purpose, with something I couldn't place. My hand instinctively reached for Violet's, pulling her closer to me. The man saw us, and for a moment, I thought he was going to pass by. But instead, he stopped, his eyes locking onto mine. There was something unsettling about his gaze, too intense, too knowing. He didn't smile, didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, sizing us up. I could feel the weight of the air, thick with suspicion. My mind raced. Was this someone we could trust? Or was he just another threat in the wilderness? He spoke first, his voice gruff, "You two look like you've been through hell." I didn't reply immediately, my instincts telling me to remain cautious, to keep my guard up. Violet squeezed my hand tightly, her eyes wide, scanning the man warily. "You lost?" the man asked, his tone shifting slightly, almost like he was offering help. I wasn't convinced. I kept my distance, both physically and mentally. "We're fine," I said, though my words felt hollow. I didn't feel fine. We were anything but fine. The man chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Don't look fine to me. Looks like you could use some food, maybe a place to rest." "I have a fire. Some supplies." My mind immediately went into overdrive. A fire. Supplies. It sounded too good to be true. How could we be sure he wasn't just leading us into another trap? My eyes darted to Violet, who seemed to shrink into herself, her body trembling even more than before. She was barely able to keep her eyes open. She didn't need to hear me voice my doubts, I knew she felt it too. "Why are you offering to help us?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, but I could hear the edge of suspicion in it. The man shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Just trying to survive like you. Maybe we can help each other out. You don't look like you're going to make it much longer without help." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on me. I could feel the cold creeping into my bones, the exhaustion threatening to take over. But something in his tone didn't sit right with me. I wasn't sure I could trust him. I wasn't sure I could trust anyone anymore. "I'm not interested in joining anyone else," I said, my voice firm, though the panic was building in my chest. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, his lips curling into something that resembled a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I'm not asking you to join anyone," he said, his voice dropping low. "But you and your little girl here might want to reconsider. I'm offering you food, warmth, a chance to survive. You won't find that alone out here." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The offer hung in the air, tempting, dangerous. I could see the fear in Violet's eyes, and my protective instincts flared. I had to keep her safe. But at what cost? "Why should I trust you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though doubt was creeping in. The man took a step closer, his eyes flicking to Violet. "Because if you don't, you'll freeze out here. Or worse. And I'm not the only one in these woods." That statement hit me like a slap. I didn't know whether it was a threat or a warning, but I wasn't willing to find out. I stepped back, pulling Violet with me. My gut told me to run. I didn't trust him, not for a second. "We're fine," I said, more firmly this time, though my voice wavered. "We don't need your help." The man didn't argue. He simply watched us for a moment, his eyes narrowing as though sizing us up. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the growing darkness. I didn't move at first, staring after him. My heart was pounding in my chest, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I felt like I had narrowly escaped something dangerous, but the lingering unease in my gut told me that the danger wasn't over. Violet looked up at me, her voice shaky. "Mom, do you think he was lying?" "I don't know, sweetie," I said, kneeling down to her level. "But I don't trust him. We can't trust anyone out here. Not anymore." The words hung heavy in the air. Trust. It felt like something I had lost a long time ago, something that had been slowly chipped away at by the people I had trusted most. Now, it seemed like even the simplest decisions were tainted by doubt. We started walking again, the snow crunching beneath our feet. The sky was getting darker, the wind picking up. Every step felt heavier, the weight of the world pressing down on me. But I couldn't stop. Not now. Not when there was still a chance to get out of here, to survive. As we moved deeper into the woods, my mind raced. What if the man had been telling the truth? What if we had just passed up the chance for safety? The doubt gnawed at me, but I couldn't afford to dwell on it. I had to focus on keeping Violet alive, on getting us out of this wilderness before it was too late. The sound of crunching snow in the distance brought me back to reality. I froze, heart pounding in my chest. Someone, or something, was out there. "I think we need to move faster," I whispered to Violet, my voice low and tense. The fear in my chest was growing, but I couldn't let her see it. We quickened our pace, but the footsteps behind us grew louder, closer. I could feel my heart race in my throat. The woods were closing in on us, the sense of danger intensifying with every passing second. I couldn't help but think, was this the beginning of something worse? Had I made a terrible mistake by refusing help? Or was this just the beginning of something even more dangerous? The wind howled outside the small cabin, the storm pressing against the walls as if it wanted to tear the place apart. Inside, the fire crackled, casting long, flickering shadows across the room. The warmth from the fire was a stark contrast to the bitter cold that awaited us just beyond those thin wooden walls. I sat near the hearth, staring into the flames, letting the heat seep into my frozen body while my mind wandered. Violet lay on the worn cot beside me, her face pale and exhausted. She hadn't said much in the past few hours, too tired to speak, too drained to even look up. I wanted to comfort her, tell her everything would be okay, but deep down, I wasn't sure I could even comfort myself. The isolation felt heavier now, the storm outside intensifying. Every gust of wind seemed to echo my own inner turmoil. I couldn't escape the thoughts that circled in my head, relentless and unforgiving. My past, my family, my failures, everything felt like a weight I could no longer carry. I thought back to my childhood. I saw myself again, standing in that house, watching my family, feeling invisible. I wasn't always like this, cold, distant, protective. But over the years, I learned to protect myself because no one else would. I had been the good daughter, the one who held everything together, never asking for help, never showing weakness. But that wasn't enough. None of it was. I remembered my mother, her face always tense, always watching, never truly seeing me. I had tried so hard to please her, to be perfect, to earn her love. But it never came. I had buried all of it deep, thinking that if I just kept going, kept surviving, I would somehow find the validation I craved. But I was wrong. That kind of validation was never coming. "Why do we keep running, Mom?" Violet's voice broke through my thoughts, her words simple but heavy. I hadn't realized how much she was watching me, how much she was picking up on. She looked at me with those big, innocent eyes, still so full of hope despite everything that had happened. I didn't know how to answer her. "Because we have to, sweetie," I said, my voice strained. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth, how lost I felt, how uncertain everything was. We have to keep going to survive. But the truth was, I didn't know if I could keep running. Every step felt like I was running from myself, from the past that had chained me, from the people who had left me broken. My mind drifted back to my brother, Tom. What had brought him here, to this forsaken place? After everything, after all the years of silence, after watching me fall apart and doing nothing, why now? Was it guilt? Was it real concern for me and Violet? Or was it something else? I remembered the last time I saw him, the disappointment in his eyes as he turned his back on me, the way he always sided with our parents. He never understood me, never saw how hard I fought to keep everything together. He just assumed I was fine, that I could handle it. And in a way, maybe I had. But it had cost me everything. The sound of a knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. Who could it be? The thought of someone else out there, someone else who might offer help, sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I moved cautiously toward the door, my breath shallow, my hand shaking as I reached for the handle. When I opened it, I couldn't believe my eyes. There, standing in the doorway, was Tom. I stood there, frozen, my mind unable to process the sight. Was he really standing there, or was this just another trick of my mind? It had to be him, but after all this time, after everything that had happened, seeing him again was almost too much to bear. Marissa. Violet. His voice cracked, hoarse from the cold. I've been looking for you. I'm sorry. I should have been here sooner. The words felt like a slap in the face. I didn't move, didn't speak. My emotions roiled inside me, anger, disbelief, hurt. Why now? After all these years of silence, why had he come? I don't understand, I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Where have you been all this time? Why show up now, after everything that's happened? Tom stepped forward, his eyes searching mine, his face drawn with exhaustion. I've been watching from afar. I've been struggling with guilt. I've seen what's happened to our family. I should have reached out. I should have been there. My anger flared. It's too late for guilt, Tom. Too late for apologies. You and Dad. I stopped myself before I could say more. He sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. I know I can't undo what's been done, but I want to make things right. I'm trying to fix things, Marissa. I don't want to be part of the reason you're out here, alone with Violet. I clenched my fists, the fury rising in my chest. You're just like him. You're all just the same. You come to me when it's convenient, when it suits you. But where were you when I needed you most? He flinched, but his voice remained steady. I'm sorry. I can't undo the past, but I'm here now. I want to help you. The words felt hollow, like the emptiness of the cabin we were trapped in. How could I trust him? How could I trust anyone anymore? Suddenly, it clicked. The reality of what was happening hit me like a freight train. Tom wasn't here to make things right. He was here because our father had sent him. He wasn't here for me or Violet, he was here because he had been told to come. Tom saw the look on my face and quickly added, Dad wants you to come back. He's been asking for you. He wants you to return, Marissa. He needs you. The words hung in the air like poison. I felt the blood drain from my face. So this was why he was here. It wasn't about family. It was about business. Our father didn't want me back to heal the wounds of the past. He wanted me back to fix whatever broken piece of his life I was supposed to fill. I felt sick to my stomach. I'm not going back. Not to him. Not for any reason. Tom's face fell, but I saw the hint of desperation in his eyes. Please, Marissa, you don't understand. There's a lot at stake. You don't have to forgive him. Just come back. It's not too late. I could feel the anger bubbling up, a sharp burn in my throat. No, Tom. I won't go back to that. I'm not your pawn, and I'm not going to be his either. I turned away, grabbing Violet's hand. The weight of it all felt unbearable. We're leaving, and I'm never going back. The door slammed shut behind him. We walked away from the cabin, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I realized something. I wasn't going back to my family. I wasn't going back to that broken, toxic cycle. For the first time, I was truly free. But as we stepped into the night, the weight of my decision hung over me. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about breaking free. As we prepared to leave the cabin the next morning, a loud crash sounded outside. My heart stopped. Violet, stay close, I whispered, my voice trembling. Whatever had followed us was finally showing itself. The storm had grown fierce, pounding against the cabin with a relentless force. The winds screamed like wild animals, twisting and howling as the snow swirled in blinding sheets outside. The fire flickered, casting long, dancing shadows against the cold, rough walls. It felt as if the entire world had disappeared, leaving just Violet and me, trapped in a small cabin, surrounded by nothing but cold, darkness, and isolation. The night had fallen swiftly, the day swallowed by the dark clouds that seemed to stretch forever. I could feel the weight of the storm pressing down on me, both outside and inside. The walls of this cabin were meant to keep us safe, but they were slowly becoming a prison. The small window I had looked out of earlier now seemed like a cruel reminder of the world beyond, one that I couldn't reach. Violet lay curled up on the cot, her body trembling not just from the cold but from the fear that had settled deep into her bones. She hadn't said much for hours, but her wide eyes watched me closely, as if she could sense my growing unease. It was hard to know how much she truly understood, but I knew she felt the tension in the air, the same way I did. I sat by the fire, my mind racing, trying to come up with a plan, something to hold onto, but each time I thought of something, it crumbled under the weight of reality. Our supplies were low. The generator was running out of fuel. The power would go out soon, and then the storm would have us in its grasp completely. We couldn't stay here. I knew that, but where could we go? I glanced over at Violet, who was now staring at me, her small voice breaking the silence. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" The question pierced me to the core. I had promised her that we would make it, that we would get out of this. But how could I give her an answer now when everything I thought I knew about survival had become uncertain? I forced a smile, though it felt hollow. "We're going to be fine, sweetheart. I'll make sure of it." I wasn't sure if I was lying to her or to myself. I looked at the dwindling food and water supplies on the table and thought about the past choices that had brought us here. The decision to leave, to run, to trust no one, had it been the right one? My family's betrayal still gnawed at me. It was one thing to survive in the wilderness, but another to survive the weight of the emotional scars they had left me with. I couldn't help but think back to the life I had left behind. How many times had I tried to prove my worth to my family? To my parents? I had been the dutiful daughter, the one who kept everything together, kept the peace, even when they never acknowledged me for it. They never truly saw me, never truly loved me for who I was. They loved what I could do for them, how I could serve them. And then there was Tom. My brother. After all these years, why had he come? Was it guilt? Was it real concern for me? Or was it just more of the same manipulation from the family I had spent so many years running from? The storm outside seemed fitting, as it mirrored the storm inside me, the raging turmoil that I couldn't escape. I stood and moved toward the window, staring out into the blizzard. The coldness of the night seemed to match the growing chill inside me. I wasn't just running from the storm outside, I was running from my own life. From my own decisions, from everything I had ever known. As the wind howled louder, I realized something. I couldn't run anymore. This storm was as much a part of me as the past I had been avoiding. I had spent so much of my life running, from my family, from my past, from the pain they had caused. But no more. I had to face it. I had to confront the things I had buried deep inside me. Only then could I move forward. I turned back to Violet, who was still watching me. Her face was pale, but her eyes were strong. She had her own fears, her own scars, but she had been through so much already. She was stronger than I had given her credit for. And I realized, in that moment, that I couldn't afford to keep running, not for her, not for me. The storm outside was fierce, but it was nothing compared to the storm I had to face within myself. I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore, I was fighting for my future, for Violet's future. I couldn't let the past control me any longer. Suddenly, I knew what I had to do. It wasn't just about surviving the wilderness, it was about surviving my own fear. I needed to stop running. The storm outside had nothing on the storm I had carried inside me for all these years. I sat down next to Violet, who was looking up at me with wide eyes. "We're not running anymore, sweetie," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We're going to fight. We're going to make it through this, together." She smiled, a faint glimmer of hope in her tired eyes. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to believe it. I started organizing the supplies, thinking ahead. We couldn't stay here, not for long. But we could move forward. The storm was strong, but we were stronger. We had to be. But just as I finished packing, the sound of a vehicle broke through the howling wind. My heart stopped. I rushed to the window, peering through the snow, trying to make out the shape of the vehicle. It wasn't just the wind and the storm, it was someone. Someone was out there. I grabbed Violet's hand, my heart racing. Stay close, I whispered. We can't let anyone stop us. The footsteps outside grew louder, and I recognized the voice. Tom. I didn't want to face him. Not now, not after everything, but there was no escaping it. The past was back, and it was knocking at my door. The air felt different this evening. The storm outside had finally begun to subside, leaving a silent calm in its wake. The wind still howled faintly, but they no longer had the ferocity they once did. The world outside was buried in snow, and yet, inside the cabin, the quiet felt oppressive. The stillness settled deep into my bones, almost as if it was trying to hold me there, forcing me to think, to make a decision. Violet had finally fallen asleep, her small form tucked under the heavy blanket. Her soft breathing was the only sound in the cabin, a stark contrast to the chaos that had reigned just hours before. I watched her for a moment, feeling the weight of the responsibility pressing down on me. I had promised her that we would be okay, but how could I promise that when I felt the storm of my past bearing down on me? I had thought I could run forever. I thought that if I just kept moving, kept hiding, I could escape everything that had haunted me for years. But here I was, facing it all again. The past wasn't something you could outrun, no matter how fast you moved. It had caught up with me, and now I had no choice but to confront it. My phone buzzed on the table beside me, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Tom. I felt a knot form in my stomach. I didn't want to read it, but I had no choice. With shaking hands, I unlocked the screen. The message was simple. Marissa, I know you're angry, but you need to come back. Violet's safety is at risk. Please, don't make the mistake of leaving us again. I stared at the screen, feeling the old wounds open up. The words were so familiar, so laced with the same emotional manipulation that had kept me tied to my family for so long. I had been running from these chains for years, and now they were calling me back, trying to reel me in once more. I glanced at Violet, her face soft and innocent in sleep. I couldn't let her grow up in the shadow of this dysfunction, in the midst of the lies and the betrayal. I knew what I had to do. I was done running. I stood up and paced around the cabin, the weight of my decision pressing on me. The storm outside had subsided, but a new storm was brewing inside me. Tom's words echoed in my head, but I couldn't let them control me anymore. I had been silent for too long, too afraid to confront the people who had made me feel less than, who had shaped me into someone I wasn't. The only way forward was to break free. I grabbed my jacket and stepped toward the door. My heart was pounding, and my mind was racing, but there was a sense of clarity now. This was it. There was no turning back. Whatever happened next, I would face it head on. For Violet. For me. The walk to the family home was long and heavy, my thoughts swirling with every step. Each footfall felt like it was carrying me toward a reckoning. I had spent so many years burying my feelings, pretending that I was fine, but I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't let the weight of their betrayal crush me any longer. When I finally arrived at the house, the familiar sight of it sent a shiver down my spine. I hadn't been here in years, and it felt like a lifetime since I'd left. My family's home, the place that was supposed to be a refuge, now felt like a cage. I stood at the door for a long moment, my hand hovering over the handle. My heart was racing, my mind screaming at me to turn around, to leave. But then I thought of Violet. She deserved better. She deserved to know that there was strength in standing up, in not accepting the lies and the manipulations that had torn me apart for so long. I pushed the door open. Tom stood on the other side, his face cold and guarded. The moment our eyes met, I felt the old tension crackle between us. I had spent so many years trying to make him understand, trying to get him to see what our family had done to me. But now, I didn't need his understanding. I didn't need anyone's approval. You don't have to do this, Tom said, his voice cold but carrying a hint of something else, guilt, maybe? Regret? You're making a mistake, Marissa. I felt the anger rise inside me, bubbling just beneath the surface. I had spent too many years carrying his guilt, their guilt. I was done. You don't get to decide that anymore, I said, my voice steady but raw. You don't get to control me. Not anymore. Not after everything. He shook his head, his jaw tight. You're abandoning us. You're abandoning Violet. I felt a laugh bubble up, bitter and dark. Abandoning you? Tom, I'm finally choosing to live for myself. You've never understood that, have you? All this time, you've just been pretending. Pretending to care, pretending to be the good son, when all you've done is contribute to this lie. I'm done with it. I'm done with all of you. He stepped closer, his expression darkening. You think you're the only one who's hurt? You think you're the only one who's suffered? You've always been so selfish, Marissa. So focused on yourself. You don't get to run from this. You don't get to leave us behind. I felt a surge of heat, but I held it in, refusing to let him see how much his words still stung. I'm not running anymore, Tom. I'm standing up. I'm not going to let you or anyone else dictate my life. He opened his mouth to argue, but I stopped him. I've spent enough of my life running. I'm done. And if you can't see that, then you're never going to understand me. I'm leaving, Tom, and I'm not coming back. I turned to leave, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stepped into the cold night air, I heard him call after me, his voice desperate. Marissa, don't do this. Not for her. For Violet's sake, come back. You can't do this to us. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I walked into the night, the cold biting at my skin, but I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. I stepped out into the cold night, my breath forming clouds in the air. I couldn't hear his voice anymore, only the sound of my own heartbeat, steady and strong. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Every breath I took felt heavier than the last. The harsh overhead lights flickered briefly, making the space feel colder than it already was. I had come a long way to get here, but I knew the hardest part was just beginning. Today, the past would be laid bare, and I would finally have a chance to speak my truth. I walked in slowly, taking in the sight of my family sitting across the room. Tom's eyes locked onto mine immediately, and the coldness in his gaze made my stomach churn. My mother sat next to him, her hands folded in her lap, her face set in a practiced mask of indifference. I could feel their presence like a weight on my chest, but I wasn't afraid anymore. This wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, about Violet, about reclaiming my life. The sound of the gavel brought me back to the present. The trial had begun. My attorney stood to speak, and the tension in the room grew palpable. Your Honor, he began, his voice steady, we are here today because of years of manipulation, emotional abuse, and neglect that my client, Ms. Marissa Blackwell, has endured at the hands of her family. The evidence we are about to present will show the extent of this abuse. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. The truth was finally coming out. I had spent years buried under this weight, and now I was going to let it all be known. No more silence. No more hiding. The attorney handed over documents and evidence. The room went silent as the first piece of evidence was presented: messages, letters, recordings. All the pieces of the puzzle that had been carefully hidden away for so long, now exposed for all to see. My eyes flicked over to Tom, watching his face twist in disbelief as the evidence mounted. The manipulations, the emotional blackmail, all the lies they had used to control me. The truth hit him harder than I thought it would. And for the first time, I saw him falter. The courtroom was still. I couldn't take my eyes off Tom, who sat with his head down, his shoulders tight. The weight of what he had done to me hung heavy in the air. I had done this. I had taken the first step. And now, the truth would take its course. The tension in the room thickened as I prepared to speak. The time had come for me to take the stand. I stood up, legs shaky but determined, and walked to the witness box. The eyes of everyone in the room were on me, and for a moment, I felt small. But then I saw Violet in the back of the room, her wide eyes watching me. And suddenly, I felt tall again. I had to do this, for her. I cleared my throat, trying to steady myself as I spoke. I'm here today because for too long, I allowed my family to control my life. They manipulated me, belittled me, and made me feel like I wasn't enough. I've lived with that weight for years, trying to carry it all, trying to be everything they wanted me to be. Tom's voice cut through the room. You're exaggerating, Marissa. None of this is true. You're just angry because you chose to leave. You're abandoning us. I took a deep breath, swallowing the surge of emotion threatening to overwhelm me. This was it. No more silence. No more holding back. You don't get to say that anymore, Tom, I said, my voice shaking but firm. You don't get to rewrite history. You don't get to gaslight me anymore. You made me believe for years that I wasn't worthy of love, that I had to prove myself to you, to Mom, to everyone. But I'm done with that. I'm done with living for you." The room was silent for a moment. I could feel the eyes of the entire courtroom on me, but for the first time, I didn't care. I was telling the truth. My truth. And nothing could take that away from me. I continued, "I'm here because I've spent too long hiding from the truth, from the reality of the family I grew up with. I'm here because I refuse to let Violet grow up thinking that this toxicity, is normal. That this is what family is supposed to look like." I paused, looking directly at my mother, who was still sitting stoically, her lips pressed tight. "And I'm here to tell you that I will never, ever let you control me again." The courtroom was quiet. Even Tom had no words, his face a mixture of shock and anger. Then, something unexpected happened. My mother stood up, her voice trembling with false vulnerability. "Marissa, please. If you go public with this, it will destroy everything. There's a secret in this family, something so dark. You have no idea what you're doing. You're about to ruin us all." My heart dropped, the familiar threat hanging in the air. It was the same manipulation I had grown up with, the same words, the same guilt. For a moment, I felt a flicker of fear, but it was quickly extinguished. "You don't get to scare me anymore," I said, my voice strong. "I've heard all your threats. I've been living under your shadow for far too long. No secret, no lie, can control me anymore." The courtroom was still, waiting. I could feel the weight of my mother's gaze, but I held steady. Then, I pulled out my phone. I didn't look at Tom, or my mother, or anyone else. I simply played the recording. My mother's voice filled the courtroom. "I've done what I had to do, Marissa. You're my pawn, and I'll always make you believe it's for your own good. I'll keep you in line, one way or another." I watched as my family's world crumbled. Their faces were stunned, shocked, and unable to speak. The facade had shattered. The judge looked at me, nodding in approval. The room had no choice but to confront the truth now. There was no denying it. I stood up, my legs a little weaker now, but my heart was lighter. I had done it. I had broken free. And nothing, not even my family, could take that away from me. As I left the courtroom, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Tom. "Come back, for Violet's sake. You're making a huge mistake." I put my phone down and looked forward, knowing that whatever lay ahead was mine to decide, free from their chains. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden light across the beach as I walked along the shoreline, feeling the cool breeze tug at my hair. The waves rolled in steadily, their rhythmic crash against the sand almost soothing. For the first time in a long time, the world felt peaceful. I'd just left the courtroom, the weight of everything I'd been carrying for so many years beginning to lift, but not completely. The air was still thick with the emotions of what had just transpired. I had won, yes, but the victory was bittersweet. I wasn't sure if there was any true victory in all of this. I had gotten justice, but it had come at a heavy cost. As I stood by the water, staring into the vast horizon, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led me to this moment. The years of abuse, the lies, the manipulation, it had all brought me here. But I was still standing, and that, in itself, felt like a triumph. I looked down at my reflection in the water, the image of a woman who had survived. A woman who had fought back. The years of pain and betrayal had scarred me, yes, but they no longer defined me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I closed my eyes, letting the wind brush across my face. There was a sadness to it, the kind that comes with realizing how much time has been lost. The years spent pleasing my family, constantly fighting for their love and acceptance, only to be left feeling empty. But that emptiness, I realized, no longer had power over me. The waves lapped at my feet, their coolness grounding me in the moment. There was no rush, no obligation to return to a world that had only ever offered me conditional love. It was time to start living for myself. I stayed there for a while, letting the beauty of the sunset wash over me. I wasn't just walking away from my family, I was walking toward a future where I could finally be free. But just as I was starting to feel that sense of liberation, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message. My stomach dropped as I saw who it was from, my mother. I hesitated for a moment, staring at the screen, my fingers frozen. The message was brief, but the words hit hard. I know I've hurt you, Marissa. I'm sorry. Please, come home. We need you. Violet needs you. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. Part of me longed for that apology, for the family that I had always hoped would love me unconditionally. But deep down, I knew this was just another attempt at manipulation. It wasn't an apology, it was a plea for control. I felt a surge of anger rise in me. How could she? After everything, after all the years of manipulation, the guilt trips, the lies, how could she just expect me to come back as if nothing had ever happened? How could I let her back into my life? I took a deep breath, the anger and sadness welling up inside me, but I pushed it down. I had been down this road too many times. I couldn't go back to that place. Not for her. Not for anyone. I deleted the message without a second thought. Mom? Violet's voice cut through my thoughts, soft and uncertain. I turned to see her standing a few paces behind me, her eyes watching me closely. I smiled at her, forcing the tightness in my chest to loosen. Yeah, sweetheart? I asked, my voice steady. Violet took a few steps closer, her eyes full of concern. Are you okay? I nodded slowly. I'm okay. I just needed to think. Violet stood beside me now, her gaze following mine as we both watched the sun dip lower, the sky turning shades of pink and orange. Mom, how did you forgive yourself? Her question was quiet, but the weight of it hung in the air. I turned to face her fully, my heart swelling. It wasn't about forgetting the past, honey. It was about not letting it control me anymore. I had to stop blaming myself for things that were never my fault. I had to let go of all the guilt I'd been carrying for so long. Violet's face softened, and I could see the understanding in her eyes. She had watched me fight for so long, but now I could see her starting to grasp the strength I'd found in myself. The same strength I was trying to pass on to her. Forgiveness is a gift, Violet, I continued, my voice gentle but firm. Not to the people who hurt you, but to yourself. It's about giving yourself the peace you deserve, so you can move forward. She nodded slowly, her eyes searching mine as if trying to understand the full depth of what I was saying. We stood there together for a while, the cool evening air brushing against our faces, the sound of the waves washing over us. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was starting to feel like I could handle whatever came next. As we walked back to the car, I felt a sense of finality settle over me. I had come so far, further than I ever thought possible. But the journey wasn't over yet. Back at home, I sat down at the table and opened my laptop. I'd been thinking about it for a while, and now it felt like the right time. I booked a flight. It was time to go somewhere I'd always wanted to visit. Somewhere I could find peace, somewhere I could reclaim my independence. It was symbolic. A fresh start. A new beginning. As I booked the ticket, the excitement buzzed through me. But there was something else, too. A quiet sadness that came with leaving everything behind, the memories, the family heirlooms, the pieces of my past. I packed them up, but I left them behind. The past no longer had any hold over me. I was ready. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew I was finally free to choose my own path. As I stood up to prepare for the journey, a letter caught my eye on the kitchen counter. I hadn't seen it before. Curious, I walked over and opened the envelope slowly, the weight of its contents pressing against my hands. As I pulled out the letter, my heart skipped a beat. I wasn't sure if this was the beginning of something new or the final chapter of a past I was ready to leave behind.